So we just finished talking about Japan and how Japan openly created the aggression in China. And historians have identified that that is the initiation of World War II. That's more from a global perspective. There are other historians that say that could have been an isolated war until all war breaks out in Europe. So we're going to now look at through the lens, and the lens we're going to go here, and I see the topic. The topic here is: did the stabilization of Europe cause the Second World War? We can restate that, and really, that guy did Hitler cause? Is he the reason for World War II? And these two guys will be related to him: Mussolini and Stalin. So let's go ahead and jump into this. This is just the intro. I like this graphic. You have access to these slides. This graphic can be a really easy way for you to kind of organize. We got the different causes. I really think that's a fantastic one. We're going to talk about the retreat of Western democracies to isolationism, appeasement, and pacifism. We're going to identify that Hitler's diplomatic revolution from 33 to 36. We're going to talk about, at the outcome of that, the appeasement of Hitler. It says 36. It really begins in 36, if not, or 35, if not earlier. And then we're going to talk about the immediate. So we got long-term, short-term, and immediate. Those are the three lenses in which we're going to look through. So let's go ahead and talk about the Western democracies. The three Western democracies: the United States, Great Britain, and France. I do think we're just going to fly through this section. I don't think there's a lot here that we don't know about. Let's see. The key word here: appeasement. When we think of appeasement, I want you to see attempting to solve a problem by somewhat satisfying an aggressor. And we've talked about this with Louis XIV, if you remember that War of Devolution and the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle. But this appeasement is really going to be comparable. That when they allow for Hitler to do what he wants to do, that's going to create a lot of chaos. That's the first term. The second term is pacifism. And with the IC, if it doesn't have the IC, it's an individual belief. With the IC, it's an official government policy. And pacifism is the rejection of war as a tool of diplomacy. This kind of goes back to, you can say, the Locarno Pact, the Kellogg-Briand Pact, those kind of elements in which the Western democracies were attempting to erase war. So the first one we're going to look at, we've seen this political cartoon before. I really love it. We see the United States withdrew from its hegemony in 1920 by rejecting the Treaty of Versailles and the League of Nations. Throughout the 1920s, the cool slogan for the United States was: the business of America is business, and the business of Europe is Europeans. A definitive element in which we're going to let the business of those business cycles save our country. Unfortunately, that was short-lived. In 1929, when the Great Depression ends, we go from the business of America is recovery. But even through this, in the 1920s and 1930s, the United States, despite how the United States jacked up the balance of powers in World War I, offsetting them, forcing Germany into an unconditional surrender, instead of where the Americans were responsible for that, instead of maintaining that stability, they withdraw. And by withdrawing, they leave chaos. So that's the United States. Is the United States responsible for World War I? I do think you can argue that with these slides. Now, Great Britain, we see the retreat of Great Britain. This is a WASP term, but I love this term, the not-so-splendid isolation. It is really about how England is beginning its decolonization. They're beginning to go from the once great British Empire to something less. Britain transitioned from a creditor nation to a debtor nation. I really think that's important. A creditor nation is that you're wealthy, you're lending money out. At the outcome of the war, they're a debtor nation. They're borrowing. They're at the whims of another country. With the general strike of 1926 and the ensuing depression, the British did not have the resources to assert its hegemony over Europe or even maintain its empire. By the 1930s, the British government number one fear was the German bombing of the home front. Remember, during World War I, the Zeppelins came, but the Zeppelins were easily able to manage. But in the 1920s, you have the first bombers. And those bombers are propeller airplanes that were able to drive over the home front, fly over the home front, and drop bombs. The British fear that. That's why they fully embraced appeasement. They were going to allow any of activities on Europe as long as it doesn't affect them. They're going to go back to that traditional let sleeping dogs lie. What do we see here? I love this little cartoon. You have this appeasement. You have Japan over here. There's some really horrible things about that element. We see that trying to hold it together, British prestige. And what's happening here? The British prestige is being cut by appeasement and by the Pacific Theater. And what's going to happen to England? This is Chamberlain, Neville Chamberlain, and we're about to see him collapse and be impelled. The message being conveyed by this political cartoon is it's only a matter of time that appeasement will ultimately kill Great Britain. Again, we see that Great Britain's retreating. It's going to create an opportunity for Germany to misbehave. Third French Republic is in no better shape. I love this title of this book, The Hollow Years, France in the 1930s. We've already talked about the polarization, the lack of strength. So let's go ahead and look at this. We already know that France was embittered and alone. They have no significant ally. They have, instead of Great Britain, United States, or Russia, they have Yugoslavia. They have Romania, Poland, Czechoslovakia. These are nothing like the old alliances. France was on the verge of revolution. We've talked about that throughout. And we know that in 1938, the left discredited itself. So it's been the right. Now it's the left, so no one knows what to believe in. And this is where France begins to emerge, that they're connected to Great Britain. They cannot act until Great Britain comes out of their isolation, because France by themselves is not strong enough. Remember, there's a population crisis as the baby instead of a baby boom, they had a baby collapse, if you will. The population pattern was jacked up in France due to World War I, and they were not fully prepared. And what we see here, France is now a second-tier power on the eve of the Second World War. Clearly, they don't have the strength to do much. So what we see here, before we get to Hitler's the cause, the United States, Great Britain, and France, instead of uniting together and checking Adolf Hitler, checking Japan, what they were doing is being challenged by their own internal problems, and they're about to be collapsed. I hope that makes sense to you, and I'm going to pause here